Hello, this is Ralph K. Ginorio. It's going to be more than a few minutes today. We're approaching the 12th anniversary of the September 11th atrocities. On that day, I was beginning my second year of teaching at Shakopee Valley High School. I was teaching an odd United States history course, and what I was doing with the kids was I was preparing them for an understanding of the ideas of our Pilgrim Fathers. I taught my first lesson at around 8 o'clock in the morning, and it was done just after 9. Around 9:15, I needed to leave my classroom, which at that time was one of the modular classrooms that were in the back of the high school. I needed to talk to the guidance counselor about having some students shift from one section of my course to another section of my course. And so I left the modular, locked it up, went around the back of the school, and went towards the lobby, where I saw break time and a bunch of people gathered looking at the television, which was up on the ceiling. And I saw the guidance counselor was one of them. It was an unusually quiet group, but I didn't think anything of it. I walked over to the guidance counselor, and as I did, I glanced out of the peripheral vision and saw the Twin Towers. I'm a New Yorker. I'd been in the Twin Towers several times. I had a friend who worked in the Twin Towers in some of the years between the first and second terror attacks. The one in the 1990s and 1993, where they blew up a truck bomb in the bottom of it, and obviously the atrocities of 9/11/2001. Thank God his company was out of there by then. And I saw a plane fly into one of the towers. Now, in my life, I've had various experiences and various training. And the one consistent lesson is don't panic. If something weird happens, keep your cool, focus on the mission, do what needs to be done, and if at all possible, react later, emotionally. So I nodded to myself. You see, I knew how big the towers were. If you've never seen them with your own eyes in person, you have no idea. You can get some impression from photos taken miles away, but it's not the same as the sheer massiveness of these monoliths. And I knew how big the buildings were, and I knew that they were each designed for over 5,000 people, maybe 10,000 at full capacity. So this was bad. I knew that it was bad, but my job was to teach and to organize, and it gave me something to do, so I focused on going over to the guidance counselor, and I started to talk to him about the transfer of students. He wasn't paying any attention to me, he was looking at the screen. And I paused and looked at the screen, and I saw a second plane. It was clearly not the same plane, it was a different angle, but it was also hitting the building in a different fashion. And that's when I stopped. That's when I stopped teaching, that's when I stopped dealing with the transfer of students. I knew we were at war. I didn't know with whom. As break time ended and the second period began, I had a planning period. And a number of teachers who had a planning period were gathering in the senior social studies teacher's classroom. He had cable to watch the events as they unfold. So I joined them and I sat down quietly and I watched the towers burn. And I remember the senior teacher saying, "Notice how they're not taking any close-up. Notice how all the pictures are from miles away." And they were. And I agreed with him that there was a good reason for it. And then the first tower imploded. I stood up. Without being able to stop myself, I said, "We are at war." And I walked out, and I went down to my classroom, and I drew this very map. By then, the Palestinians were cheering in the streets. By then, it was clear that it was Islamists, Islamofascists, Islamic fundamentalists, Islamic terrorists, Al-Qaeda. And once I knew that, I knew what I was going to do. So I drew this map from memory. It's a basic map of New York City. And I placed roughly the World Trade Center, my old home in the Bronx. I'm sure my scale is wrong. And I prepared the lesson, a lecture on the historical background to these atrocities. And over the next 2 days, I taught the lesson that I'm going to be teaching over the next few videos. Once I knew who it was, I knew what the story behind these events were. Now, obviously, I wasn't a fireman on the spot. I didn't know people who were killed, personally. But my life, my world has never been the same. I reckon that's true for many of you. It was a turning point, the way Pearl Harbor was a turning point for my father-in-law, and he knew people who died in those battleships. By the end of the war, he was preparing to command a landing craft at Operation Olympic. His wife, my mother-in-law, was planning to serve on a hospital ship as a Navy nurse. They were both saved by the atom bomb. Their lives were never the same after Pearl Harbor, and mine, and many of us in America and around the world, have never been the same since the terror atrocities of September the 11th, 2001. At this moment in my life, I'm no longer teaching. I'd like to. I had to leave Shakopee because of philosophical differences with a bunch of new administrators, and, these things happen. That's Churchill, by the way, our cat, one of our cats, and he's an attention hound, and I've decided not to keep him out of here. I couldn't let the anniversary pass without telling the story. See, it's the way I kept sane. And every year since, I've introduced my world history students to the history of the world in microcosm by teaching the historical backgrounds to the September 11th attacks. I strongly recommend, if you follow through and watch more of these lessons, that you go to my Facebook page and you'll see the lecture notes, which will help you follow along, and that you find and see a movie called Obsession, which is about the Islamist war against the United States and against the West. Next video will be about the events of that morning as I understood them, and then I will go into the last 3,000 or 4,000 years of history, and as quickly as I can, intelligibly explain why we are at war. Thank you for your attention.